If you took our NumPy course, you might remember the universal functions that are available to us there, or ufuncs as they're called. Those are also available to us here in Pandas, and we can apply them to Pandas datasets. We can apply them both to series and to data frames. So here what we've done is we've created a series that has both positive and negative numbers. And we're going to apply the NumPy absolute value method to that. And it returns only positive numbers as we would expect it to. Here we're creating 12 values using the rand_n, which we know is going to give us a random sampling of both negative and positive numbers. So let's run this, and we see that we have negatives and positives, and we can run the exact same method on a data frame as we ran on the series, and it's going to convert all those negatives to positives. So what we're doing is we're applying a function to a set of data, and that's really convenient for us. However, what if we want to apply a custom function to a data set? Here we have that same RData data frame, the one that we created right here, and we're saying, well, apply a function to that data frame. Which function do we want to apply? We want to apply this custom function, and that's how we think about the syntax. What this lambda function is doing is it's taking the maximum from an index perspective. So this is a zero axis perspective. It's going to take the maximum, which appears here to be 0.1, and the minimum appears to be negative 0.98. So the range between those two is going to be around 1, isn't it? Let's run this and see. Yeah, 1.112. So what apply is doing is it's iterating through this data frame on an axis basis. And by default, it's iterating through the index axis. So it's going through here, and it's applying this function once, and then it goes through all the next values down the index and grabs the range, and then it does the third one. And it's returning a scalar value every time it completes an iteration. And it's doing it on the index axis. What if we want to get the range across the columns instead of down the index? Well, this is quite similar to what we've seen before. We run the same function with a second parameter, defining which axis we'd like to perform on. So let's run this. And going back to our original data frame, the minimum here is negative 0.4. The maximum appears to be positive 0.4. So this should be also around 1. And indeed, the range of that first row is close to 1. Just in a way of reminder, this axis 1 is also the columns. And if we run it this way, we get the same result. Likewise, if we paste this in here and change it to index, we get the same result. Or we could change this axis to the 0 axis and get the same result. Since these methods apply by default to the index or to axis 0, that's just a redundant identifier, which we don't need. Now, as we mentioned, this is simply returning a scalar value every time it iterates. And likewise, when we operate down the 0 axis, it's returning just a single scalar value. We can also return a series instead. So in this function, we're requesting a series to be returned, and that series will have the index of minimum and maximum. So it's going to run through here, and it's going to pick the minimum and the maximum from this, and then from this, and then from this. So let's run this and see the output. So the minimum from the A column is minus 0.98, and the maximum is 0.12. And so instead of a scalar value for every time it operates on an axis, it returns the series instead. And now with this, we can calculate based on a specific axis. So the most useful way to think of this apply function is that it applies only to data frames, and it applies across entire indices or across entire columns. Now the map function, however, it applies only to series objects.